So this is Samsung's S23 Ultra versus Apple's iPhone 14 Pro Max. These are one of the two biggest devices you can get out there, one of the most powerful, most complete devices out there. For the price, which one should you be getting? They're pretty much the exact same price. The iPhone does start out at $1099, but it does start out at a base storage of 128 gigabytes of storage versus the S23 Ultra starts out at 256 gigabytes of storage. And the price for that is $1199, which is the exact same price of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Of course, your regions may differ, but here in the US, that's their pricing. The S23 Ultra obviously is the newer one of the two, coming out in about mid-February, versus the iPhone came out last year in 2022, around mid-September. So it's definitely right around its half-year mark, and it's soon going to be the iPhone 15 versus the S23 Ultra. So without further ado, let's go see how they compare. Which one should you be considering, or if you have the iPhone already, should you be considering an upgrade, or is it a downgrade to the S23 Ultra? As far as the build and design, obviously you can see two very differently designed devices, but on the iPhone, you do have the stronger stainless steel frame with ceramic shield on the back glass and on the front glass, versus on the S23 Ultra, you do have the Corning Glass Victus 2 and then an aluminum frame. Both of them have a glossy frame and then a matte back glass. So they look, they have the same idea, the same concepts, but the actual finish, the build is different. So on the iPhone, you have a flat phone all around. So the back glass is flat, the front glass is flat, and the frame itself is flat as well. There's not much roundness and curvedness going around, except for the corners. It is a rounded corner as far as how it just looks. So in the hand, it is a big chunky phone, the iPhone. It's also a little bit heavier as well. But one annoying thing I don't like, as the only thing I don't like, it's just the fact that those edges are just a little bit sharp for my liking. It's not too bad, but if I really was nitpicking, that's the only thing I don't like. Versus the S23 Ultra, again, it's got a somewhat flat frame where on the side itself, the frame itself is a little bit flatter than last year's, but it still has that curved display on the front and on the back. So when they meet at the frame, it's a little bit softer feeling in your hand. It adds a pretty good amount of grip. But the top frame is flat, the bottom frame is flat, so it's got like a squarish, rectangulish, boxy look. So when they meet in the corners, it's pretty sharp. That's the one thing I don't like about the S23 Ultra. If you're not using a case, that is pretty sharp in your palm when you're holding it in the hand. So each of them have one small thing that I'm annoyed with: the sharp edges of the iPhone versus the sharp edges of the S23 Ultra. If I had to pick one based on which one I hated the least, I'd probably pick the iPhone, but both of them are big devices, like I said, heavy devices, monster devices in your hand. So I always recommend a case personally. I personally rock Dbrand's grip case on both of these devices. I just think it's a very good case. It's grippy, it adds some good protection to your device, and it's actually pretty thick, so thick that it actually protects the lenses of the S23 Ultra very nicely, in my opinion. And speaking of those lenses, as you can see, differently designed there. On the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you do have a camera bump, and then the lenses do stick out a little bit, versus on the S23 Ultra, the lenses just stick out on their own, so there's no extra camera bump. So the iPhone does rock a little bit more aggressively when you put it on a flat surface. But if you use a case such as Dbrand's grip case, both of them are going to lay completely flat. Now, as far as the hardware, both of them have their charging port at the bottom, USB-C on the S23 Ultra, which I believe is the USB 3.1, versus Lightning on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is USB 2.0, I think. So it's a bit slower as far as the data transfer speeds and charging speeds, which we'll talk about later on in the video. And then they both have dual firing speakers. So you have your speakers at the bottom and then your earpiece at the top. Both of them, in my opinion, sound pretty good. Unless you're comparing them and know a lot about audio, you might be able to say this one has a little bit better bass, a little bit better midtones and highs. But honestly, I think both of them sound really good. If anything, I'd say the iPhone maybe just sounds a little bit louder. But for watching videos, for listening to music, I think both of them are pretty good. As far as the button placements, on the iPhone, you do have the power button on one side and then the volume rocker on the other side. One thing I do like is that they're pretty big buttons, and the volume rocker is split up into up and down. Then you also have a mute switcher, which allows you to physically mute your device or unmute it without having to unlock the phone and go into the settings. In fact, I don't even think there's a quick option settings to enable that. You have to physically use that toggle. Whereas on the S23 Ultra, you only have that power button and the volume rocker on the same side. They are smaller buttons as well, but they both feel pretty clicky and pretty tactile. And also the S23 Ultra is just maybe a little bit harder to reach with one hand because they do place the volume rocker over top of the power button, so you do have to reach a little bit up there. And one thing too, even though you don't have a physical switcher to toggle on the mute and unmute for the volume settings, you can go into Good Lock and turn on the setting that allows you to click and hold the power button to mute and unmute your volumes. Now that does replace the power button or the power option menu, so you'll have to go and hold power button and volume down to go into those power options. And both of them also have decent haptics, but the one thing I like about the S23 Ultra is they have the ability to adjust your intensity of the haptics. So if you like your haptics to be a little bit more aggressive, you can turn up the intensity. On the iPhone, they're set and done, like they kind of just decide how they are for you, and they're on the subtle side for the iPhone, which feels pretty nice. It feels crisp, so for texting and stuff like that, it feels nice and crisp and tactile. For calls, it's very strong for your vibration motor. On the S23 Ultra, I keep mine in the middle, similar to the iPhone. I like to keep it somewhat subtle. If you're increasing it too high, I feel like it feels a little bit too cheap in my opinion. And then the S23 Ultra does have that S Pen included built into the device. So for me personally, I don't really utilize it to take many notes. You do have the ability to just easily take it out and start taking notes there on your home screen or your lock screen. But personally, I don't really use it to take notes. I mainly just use it to quickly exit out of a small ad that has an X button, or if I want to screenshot something very precisely, use one of the screenshot tools and get a nice screenshot of something you specifically want to get. You can also take notes of those screenshots, which I guess I do take some notes sometimes, but rarely, honestly, and it mostly just lives inside the phone. It's a cool feature for those people who want to use it. Personally, it doesn't fit into my day-to-day lifestyle, so it's there if you want it. I do wish that the Samsung would make like a S23 Pro of some sort, or make the Plus into the Pro, where they'll keep the same cameras as the Ultra, but just round out those corners, remove the S Pen, and give me maybe a slightly smaller battery at 4700 or 4800, whatever the Plus is, but give me the same cameras. That's the only thing I ask for, and display, because it is a 1440p display, which we'll get into next. But before we get to that, both of them also have an IP68 water and dust resistant rating, so splashing them with water, so taking them in the shower, splashing them while you're washing your hands or something like that, both of them will be just fine. As far as displays, the S23 Ultra does have a 6.8-inch 120Hz LTPO 1440p display with a peak brightness of, I think, 1750 nits, versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max does have a slightly smaller 6.7-inch, also slightly under 1440p, 120Hz adaptive refresh rate, Super Retina XDR OLED display with, I think, a peak of 2000 nits. Basically, both of these displays are top notch. Whatever you're doing, browsing social media, consuming a ton of content such as watching videos, short form content, long form content, whatever you're doing, it's going to be a good experience on both of them. They're both big, bright, and colorful. If you're nitpicking, you can say that the S23 Ultra can get a little bit more vivid and more punchier in the colors, just because it does have a more vivid display. But you also have the ability to turn on True Tone, and then I believe it's called Eye Comfort Shield, Enhanced Eye Comfort Shield on the S23 Ultra, which just, what it does is just it dims down the colors a little bit, and also takes away some of the blue light of the display depending on your lighting environment. And they also have that night light mode, which really removes that blue light, so that it really does make the screen look a lot warmer. The iPhone 14 Pro Max also technically can get brighter, but on the S23 Ultra you can manually get it brighter by turning on the max brightness setting, which will only be available if you turn off adaptive brightness. But if you're out in the sunlight, turn on adaptive brightness to get that brighter peak brightness. And honestly, both of them I think get plenty bright enough if you're outdoors. I think whichever one you have, you'll be able to see it no problem in a bright light environment such as out in the sun. And both of them are also very smooth displays. As I mentioned, they're both 120Hz capable, and they're both variable refresh rates. So I believe both of them can go down to about 1 Hz, which is what allows the iPhone 14 Pro Max to introduce the always on display. But besides that, Both of them are smooth, honestly, and if anything, the iPhone may be just a bit smoother just because of the animations from iOS itself. But whichever one you're using, scrolling around, opening apps, whatever you're doing, both of them are sharp, crisp, and smooth displays. So displays, both of them are top-notch regardless of which one you pick as far as quality. But as far as build, you can definitely see there's a difference in the way these displays are built. The iPhone 14 Pro Max does have a more rounded looking display, almost looks like a circuit in a race or something like that. So the corners up here just have a little bit more of a rounded finish. So you do lose, if you look closely, a little bit of content in a video or something like that when you pinch the zoom. And you also have that camera cut out, the peel cut out for the dynamic island. It's just intrusive. There's no denying that. If you are watching videos and you pinch the zoom, obviously you'll see it, but there's some videos where they have a wider aspect ratio where it starts to peek into the video, versus on the S23 Ultra, you only have that singular camera cut out. It's not gonna get in the way. It's not intrusive. And the S23 Ultra also has slightly boxier of a display in the corner, so it reaches the corner and it doesn't necessarily do a 90-degree cutout or a 90-degree angle, but it does have this rounded out just a little bit, but it's more box to box on the S23 Ultra. Both bezels are pretty minimum, but I think the iPhones are just maybe a little bit thicker, but they're the same size throughout the whole display, versus the S23 Ultra, the bottom chin is just maybe a little bit thick. And you also have a curved display on the S23 Ultra, which it's okay. It's not as curved as it was before. If you use a case, you won't have any issues with accidental touches and stuff like that. But the one thing I don't like, and it's an annoying thing with most of my Android devices, is that I can't install a glass screen protector. It's just a tough experience, and they're pretty expensive as well, versus on the iPhone, since it's completely flat, I can buy a cheap $10, $15 screen protector from Amazon and it'll help me protect it from small scratches. And then moving on to biometrics and the lock screen options, you only have the passcode available for the iPhone, versus on the S23 Ultra, you have the passcode, which is also considered a PIN, a password, or a pattern. And then for biometrics, the iPhone only has Face ID, versus the S23 Ultra that has 2D facial recognition and then an ultrasonic under display fingerprint sensor. So with that being said, the facial recognition going head to head, it's kind of unfair because obviously it's Face ID with using that 3D technology and stuff like that versus 2D. It's going to be more secure on the iPhone and a little bit more reliable in my opinion, meaning that if you're at a weird angle or if maybe you're in a low light situation or your phone's pretty far away, the iPhone does a better job at recognizing your face versus the 2D facial recognition of the S23 Ultra. Suffers a bit in low light, suffers a bit when your phone's too far away or you're at a weird angle. And there's a setting on both of them that requires you to be paying attention to the phone before it unlocks it. On the iPhone, it does a really good job of that because in the morning when you wake up, you know, your eyes half open, the screen's brighten up in your face and you're like trying to not look at the display and it's not recognizing your face. So it has to use your passcode in the morning versus the S23 Ultra. It won't recognize me as well, but I have that ultrasonic fingerprint sensor that can back me up because having both of them is amazing. The ultrasonic fingerprint sensor works pretty well in my opinion most of the time. You can just, for the most part, just tap it. I will recommend holding it for like a split second, but it's fast, it's reliable. You can also use it when the display is turned off. So if your phone's on a flat surface and you're not gonna lift it up, just place your finger over top of it and you'll unlock your device. So I personally like the fact that there's more options, not only on the lock screen, but also more options for your biometrics. Even though facial recognition may not be the most secure, I like having both for backups. Oh, and also both of them allow you to have your notifications locked. So basically the details of your notifications will be locked until it recognizes your face, which then it will unlock those details and show you what the information is for that notification. Which by the way also means that on the S23 Ultra you have the ability to either stay on the lock screen or just jump right into your phone once it recognizes your face. Versus on the iPhone, it always stays on your lock screen. It requires a swipe up to get into your home screen. Now, as far as performance, the S23 Ultra is going to have that new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy, which just means I think it's a little bit more optimized for the phone itself and also a little bit overclocked and more powerful. But either way, it also has 8 or 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM, so it's a little bit newer, a little bit faster, and I think more efficient as well. And then it also has 256 gigabytes of storage, up to a terabyte of UFS 4.0 storage, which is just, again, a little bit faster in its read and write speeds, versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max that has that A16 Bionic chip with 6 gigabytes of RAM across the board. I don't know if it's LPDDR5 or what kind of RAM it is, but it's fast enough. It's pretty fast because this phone is fast altogether. And then it has a base of 128 gigabytes of storage, up to a terabyte as well. I believe it's NVMe storage. So either way, with that being said, honestly, both of these devices, the spec sheets, I can read them all day and read benchmarks all day and show you benchmarks all day. Both of these devices are powerful, capable devices. Whatever you're doing, if you're a basic user, I don't know why you're wasting your money on these devices, but you'll be happy to know that these devices will be able to withstand anything you throw at them. So you can browse social media for hours on both of these devices and you won't encounter mostly any hiccups, maybe every now and then on both of them. It maybe just be software hiccups every now and then and glitches and delays, but still, both of them are super powerful devices and efficient devices, I will say. For the most part, they don't get super hot. They definitely get warm if you're doing more intensive stuff, so maybe playing games or using a camera for a long time. I will notice that both of them will get a little bit warm. Right around the camera section area right next to it, it'll get a little bit warm, but the whole device getting warm, no way at all. No way any of these devices are overheating. So as far as fluidity and smoothness, again, it does come down to the software a little bit. And again, like I said previously, the animations may just be a little bit cleaner looking on the iOS. So it does seem to be just a little bit sometimes more smoother. But besides that, I think both of them are smooth, fast, and capable devices. As far as software, it is going to be the battle of Android versus iOS, but more specifically, One UI with Samsung versus iOS. Personally, the way I look at it is that One UI just throws everything at you. Similar to how it sometimes throws hardware at you all the time. With software, it throws everything at you. It gives you all the options, customization features, everything that you need or you could want in a phone. You make it your own unique experience. But on top of that, they do a good job of making the UI really one-handed friendly. They make pretty big devices, so making it pretty easy to reach most stuff in your settings or in your basic apps. It's pretty convenient on the S23 Ultra. Versus on iOS, they do tend to lean more towards cohesiveness, simplicity. If there's a feature in here, it's in there for a reason and it's going to work as expected. It may not be too over exaggerated with too many options and settings, but they give you the necessities. They give you the things that matter, essentially. Not too much and not too little. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it's missing in my opinion, but essentially, I'm looking at it being super cohesive. Like, there's a reason why there's a feature in this device versus on S23 Ultra or on One UI. It's just, here's all the features. You do with it what you will. So that's the way I'm looking at both of them. So let's talk about a little bit between both of these devices or both of the softwares. So looking at the lock screen, this is the only portion of the software that iOS actually gives you more customization options than the S23 Ultra or One UI. So basically, both of them allow you to hold and edit straight from the lock screen, and both of them can allow you to change the clock style, change the color, change the style, but that's where the similarities stop. Once you look more into it, the iPhone allows you to select up to, I think, 4 widgets. So these are at-a-glance widgets. These are widgets that as soon as you open up your phone or unlock your phone or turn on your phone, you see these widgets right away. It can be the date, the time, fitness, Snapchat, Instagram, not Instagram, Gmail, all kinds of different apps that allow you to put in little at-a-glance widgets here. Versus on the S23 Ultra, you do have a few widgets, but you don't see them at a glance. You have to click on the clock to interact with them or just view them. And it's only 5 different options. I think it's like the calendar, the weather, your media, and I think routines and modes and stuff like that. And then iOS also allows you to do a depth effect. Now you do have to remove your bottom widgets, bottom row of widgets, but it's pretty cool. If you find a cool wallpaper that uses like some kind of figure in the front where you can definitely tell the foreground from the background, it can do a nice depth effect, which is pretty neat. And actually both of them can do little filters for the wallpaper. I don't ever use them, but if you want to use them, they're there. And then on the iPhone, you aren't able to change up the different icon to quick launch a different feature. you can only use the camera and the flashlight, versus on the S23 Ultra, you do have the ability to select whichever app you want to use. There's a couple quick setting tools, but the fact that you can choose any app is pretty cool. And also on the S23 Ultra, you can choose the way that the notifications are displayed to you. So you can either just turn them off completely, or choose an icon, or choose the banner. And the way that the notifications show up, I prefer the way they look on the S23 Ultra. It's kind of your own personal preference, but on the S23 Ultra, it's just, a small banner for all of them, and it starts to show its icons at the bottom. But on the iPhone, it shows, your most recent ones, and then once you view them once or after some time, it'll throw them into the notification center, which then you have to swipe up to see the rest of them. So if you miss notification, there's a chance you might not see it right away, or might get lost in your notification center. I don't know, that's a notification thing that it's just a personal preference thing. Another thing you can do on iOS straight from the lock screen is set up your modes and routines. So basically, quickly select a wallpaper, choose from a different set of wallpapers that you've created and customized, and set a routine, or not a routine, a mode for that specific wallpaper. So when you switch to that wallpaper, it goes into that mode. And then also if you turn on that mode, it'll automatically turn your phone into that wallpaper. The S23 Ultra can't do that from the lock screen. You can set up the same exact thing in the settings, but not from the lock screen. And then both also come with an always on display, as I mentioned on the iPhone. On the iPhone, it's a little bit more simple. You can either toggle on the clock, or your wallpaper, or your notifications. Versus the S23 Ultra, it shows the clock, your icons for your notifications, and then you can also change it to like an image and stuff like that. So there's a few more tweaks you can do with the S23 Ultra, but honestly, I think both of them keep it pretty simple compared to some other devices. And then getting into the home screens, this is where iOS does a lot of restricting. So for one, the grid size is a 4:6. You can't make it bigger, you can't make it smaller. And then you also can't place apps and widgets anywhere that you want. It forces them towards the top. So sometimes when I'm trying to move things around, it starts to move apps where I don't want it to move them, and it can get kind of frustrating for me. But both of them do have the ability to stack widgets, so you have the ability to kind of clean up your pages if you really wanted to. But on the S23 Ultra, the freedom to move apps anywhere, the ability to change the grid size to like I think a 4:4 up to a 7:7 with good lock, or 5:6 by default. But you just get so many different freedom and options to choose how you want to set up your home screen, your pages, and all that stuff. You can also select which home page you want it to be your main home screen. So just select whichever page you want it to be, versus on the iPhone, it's the leftmost page that you have set up. And one thing too is with the S23 Ultra, you have the ability to double tap anywhere on the home screen except for obviously where there's an app or a widget to turn off the display. Versus on the iPhone, you can't do that. Both of them can turn on with a double tap from a black display, but not once the display is turned on, you can't double tap to turn it off. Now, as far as the notifications and the quick settings, the iPhone does split them up into two different sections. So you have the notification center, and then you have your control center. So first, talking about the notification center, you just have to swipe down from the left-hand side of the display. Versus on the S23 Ultra, you just bring down your first swipe and you get access to your notifications, and also a few quick settings from the quick settings section. So with the iPhone, it's okay, it's pretty much your lock screen essentially, so it brings down your lock screen, and then you have access to, again, your widgets, your clock there, and then the notifications. So like I said, it does display the most recent ones at the top, and then it displays them in the notification center once, either after some time. I don't know how long after it puts them into the notification center, but like I said, sometimes you might miss notifications if you don't swipe all the way up to see that notification center. But the way it organizes them, I think it does a decent job. It groups them into apps that are together. So if it's the same app from the same type of notifications, so like stories from Instagram, posts from Instagram, sporting events and stuff like that. So if it's from the same stuff, it usually does a good job of grouping them. And something I did find odd is that you can't swipe both ways to clear the notification. If you swipe going to the right, it does bring over the widgets section. It just feels kind of weird. I would imagine that both of them would clear them, but it is iOS, it's not Android. I can't really nitpick it to say why you're doing that. It is what it is. Versus on the S23 Ultra, you bring down your notifications and you swipe left or right to clear them. You can, the groups, again, it does a decent job of organizing those grouped notifications from Instagram stories, from sporting events, from I don't even know, messages and stuff like that. So it does a good job of prioritizing and organizing notifications. And then again, you have access to your media player if you listen to music. You have access to the top 6 quick toggles from your quick toggle settings, and then the brightness slider if you set it up that way as well. So for me, I prefer the way it's set up on the S23 Ultra just because I'm used to Android in general, but if you use one app for a long time, you'll definitely get used to it. And then looking at the control center section for the iPhone, so you have to swipe from the top right, whereas on the S23 Ultra to get into the quick settings section, you have to swipe twice down. So swipe once for notifications and then swipe again to view all your quick toggles. Any control center, I think, is uniquely designed in my opinion. Quick access to your brightness, your volume, your quick toggles for some things. But one thing I do find a little bit annoying is that not every single quick toggle goes into a quick little mini menu. I wish that all the toggles did that, because there's some of them that when you quick or hold them down, for example, the brightness slider, it does unlock or show you more quick toggles, such as turning on the dark mode or turning off and on True Tone, versus on the S23 Ultra, it's just all quick toggles. The only slider there is the brightness, but it is below those quick settings, and basically those you turn on and off, or if you hold down, it'll go straight into the settings for the for that particular setting that you quick toggled into or hold down into. So it's really something, again, you'll get used to, and I can't really say I prefer one over the other, because if you use one over the other, you'll definitely get used to it. But if you like the way the control center works, you might be able to download it like an APK or something from the App Store that does the exact same thing on Android. And like I said, One UI focuses on that one hand ability to be able to use your phone with one hand. When you bring down those quick toggles, you can see it brings all of them down to the bottom, so it's easy to reach with one hand with your thumb, whereas on the iPhone, it's kind of just designed to be there and again forced to the top. But that's one thing, again, I prefer on One UI. Now looking at the app library and app drawer on the iPhone with iOS, with their app library, the app library is set up into folders, and those folders are pre-made by, I guess the UI system, and also depending on what the app developer labels their app as within the category, it'll then put that app into that folder based on that category. So for games, get put into games, and productivity apps get put into productivity apps. But there's some apps that I wish I could move from one place to another, just because I'm used to them being able to move those apps freely into different folders. I could disable the app library and then just create folders for myself, but if it's built in, I kind of wish it was more customizable. Sometimes I get lost into trying to find an app, so I'll just end up using the list view or trying to search for that particular app. And then the S23 Ultra, it's customization galore. It's my cup of tea. You have the ability to move apps between different pages. You can create folders within the pages, and then you can also reorder them how you want. So you can organize the app drawer how you want to organize it. And then getting on to just some additional features, both of them have the ability to double tap and triple tap. So on the iPhone, it is a accessibility setting. On the S23 Ultra, it is a good luck setting. So with the iPhone, I have it set up so that when you double tap, it brings down the control center, makes it much easier than having to reach the whole way to the top. Same thing with triple tapping. I have it set up so that it brings down the notification center. It's, again, much easier than having to reach the whole way to the top. Whereas on the S23 Ultra, I have double tapping, bringing down the notifications, and then triple tapping, opening the recent apps. Both of them also have the different modes and routines. Like I mentioned, you can edit them from the lock screen if you wanted to on the iPhone. But on the S23 Ultra, like I said, you have to go into the settings, and you do have the ability to customize more settings within your phone. So when a certain mode gets turned on, it can do a lot more things. So you can definitely automate more stuff with the S23 Ultra versus on the iOS or iPhone. There's a lot less stuff that you can change. And both of them have an ecosystem with the Apple/iOS ecosystem versus Samsung/Android ecosystem. I would say both of them have the exact same options, but on Apple/iOS, it's a bit more refined. So there's obviously the connection with your watches, your tablets, your laptops, Samsung with the TVs and all that stuff with smart things. Then there's like iOS with iMessage versus RCS. Then there's Find My versus Samsung Smart Things Find My, and then Google's Find My as well. Quick Share versus AirDrop. So everything that iPhone has, so does the S23 Ultra. But like I said, it's a bit more refined on the iPhone. And also here in the US, iMessage is a bigger deal than RCS. Now you can cross ecosystems, at least try to, meaning you can get an S23 Ultra and then get AirPods or something like that. but you can't get an Apple Watch if you want to get an S23 Ultra. If you get an iPhone, you can, I think. Actually, I don't think you can get a Galaxy Watch at all because there's no app for it unless you get an older generation watch. So that's the one and only thing, is that the different ecosystems, they're like you're trying to connect or trying to cross, but you can't fully because there's small things that you're going to miss out on features, whether it be apps and stuff like that, to customize the different hardware that you get. So it is a bit annoying, but if you had to choose one, just know that whichever one you get, you're not going to lose one particular feature. You'll have RCS, you'll have quick share and airdrop and stuff like that. It's just within its own ecosystem. And then some other things with One UI, because this thing throws so much at you. With One UI, you do have the Edge bar, which basically allows you to pull out this little toggle and handle that will give you access to basically a mini app drawer that allows you to access some apps and also access your main app drawer from there as well. And you can also do like contacts, some quick settings and stuff like that within it. The main thing with it though is the fact that you can use it to complement the multitasking abilities within the S23 Ultra, because you can customize, or not customize, you can multitask to your liking on the S23 Ultra with either a split screen mode. You can literally split the screen into halves. What I like to do is watch YouTube on one half and then watch or browse something else at the bottom. Or you can use window mode, which basically allows you to drop windows, like little windows from like a computer, and then, you know, browse them that way. I don't really do that, but if you wanted to, you can. Then you also have picture in picture, which is the only thing that the iPhone has. It has picture in picture. But one thing that's annoying is that with picture in picture on the iPhone, you can only place the video at the top or at the bottom. You can't put it in the middle. Sometimes I'm trying to like read something, like say I'm in an app like Reddit or something. I'm trying to read something that's at the top. I'm just trying to move it down a little bit, but it goes to the bottom, and then vice versa. On the S23 Ultra, you can just move it wherever you want. Obviously not in the middle, but from side to side. You can increase the size of that picture-in-picture window as well on both of them. But multitasking though, it's way, way better on the S23 Ultra. One UI also has secure folder, which basically allows you to basically duplicate some apps and also hide away some images, some files, and just keep your some certain stuff in your phone secure with your biometrics. You also have Samsung Dex, which I personally don't use, but basically you can connect your phone to a display and turn it into this Windows-like UI experience. It's there if you want to use it, but I don't really use it. You also have Bixby screen calling, which is not as good as the Google Assistant screen calling, but basically if you get a phone call and you don't want to answer it, have Bixby answer it for you, and you have these quick options that Bixby can talk to the user for you, and then you can see what the other person's saying to you. You can also type out something you want, a message as well, so you can literally have Bixby just cuss out this user if you wanted to, and it's actually pretty funny in my opinion. But yeah, it's there if you want to use it. It's pretty cool, but not as good as the Google Assistant in my opinion. And then lastly, you have Good Lock. Just a ton. When I mean a ton, I mean a ton of options here. You can really go crazy with how you want to set up your device, and I'm not going to go into it, but look at the modules. There's a ton of options there. And then with iOS, the only main thing that I can really think about that stands out compared to One UI that you don't have, in fact, you probably can have it with a different third-party app, but the Dynamic Island, you have the ability to use the Dynamic Island, which basically it dynamically transforms itself and changes itself whenever there's like music playing or whenever you get a call or you have a timer going. You can interact with it by holding it or tap on it to quickly either change between those two different things that you have set up or go into that app directly. It's cool. It's a waste. It's a waste of that pill cutout in my opinion. Get rid of it, please. Get rid of it. And one thing with iOS is that I don't like is that not every single app, every single feature setting or whatever allows you to go back by swiping to the left. You have to click a X or a back button or something within that app to be able to go back. Versus on the S23 Ultra with One UI or just Android in general, you just have to swipe left, swipe right to go back. It's so much easier, cleaner, because there's so many times where I'm trying to go back on something and either the X button isn't working for that app or it's stuck. I can't figure it out. So I just have to swipe home, close the app, and reopen it, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, that's one big nitpick I have there. But lastly, software support. The S23 Ultra will be getting 5 years of security updates, of 4 years of major OS updates, versus iOS will be getting, or the iPhone 14 Pro Max will be getting, I think, roughly 6 years of just OS updates in general. So you're covered on both of them. But the one thing, since it does last a little bit longer and it's in its software updates and in its major updates as well, the resale value will definitely be better on the iPhone. And as far as consistency, it seems to be at least a month for each phone. So I'd say both of them are pretty good when it comes to software updates and consistency. But obviously you can see, in my opinion, software package, I personally will go towards the One UI features. As far as the cameras, both of these devices have such amazing camera systems that when you compare them side by side, it is tough to choose, but there's definitely some small differences when it comes to both of them. So just a disclaimer though, I'm not a heavy camera user. I just point and shoot, and whatever I get, I go with that. So I don't really try to tweak my photos. I don't do any kind of post editing or anything like that, or I don't even really post them anywhere besides for this video. So you can say that I'm not really a big camera person, even though most of the presentations and most of the videos that you see out there is all about the camera. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible and give you my thoughts from just looking at these photos. Starting off the back cameras, you do have a 200 megapixel wide on the S23 Ultra versus a 48 megapixel wide on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide on the S23 Ultra versus a 12 megapixel ultra wide on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and then a 10 megapixel telephoto on the S23 Ultra versus a 12 megapixel telephoto on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And then lastly, you do have an additional periscope telephoto on the S23 Ultra, that being a 10 megapixel. But overall, as far as like the quality and stuff like that, the S23 Ultra does add a little bit of extra sharpness and a little bit of extra saturation and vibrancy, and maybe dials it up a little bit in the exposure as well. So all those little things, the S23 Ultra just likes to dial it up just a little bit to add a little bit more pop, a little bit more richness to the photo overall, versus the iPhone just tends to make colors a little bit more muted, just means that it's a little bit more natural looking. So it really does depend, I think, in the situation you're in, whether you like a more poppy looking photo that you can probably just post straight onto social media without having to edit it, versus on the iPhone, it's more on the natural side. So really, like I said, depends on your personal liking. I personally think it depends on what I'm shooting. If it's like the nature and stuff like that, I kind of think I prefer the natural look of the iPhone. The iPhone also has a slightly wider ultra wide because it is a 0.5x versus 8.6x on the S23 Ultra. And on top of that, both of them also have autofocus on their ultra wide, so you can get like a macro like shot. And as far as zooming in for photos on the back, you do have the ability to go up to 100x zoom on the S23 Ultra versus just 15x on the iPhone. So it just completely crushes the iPhone when it comes to the telephoto. It is missing some kind of periscope zoom to be able to get a little bit further. So I would say from 10 to 30x, I would say you get a pretty decent usable photo on the S23 Ultra, but anything further from that, I think it's just more of a gimmick and be able to use it as like a telescope. But yeah, it's there if you want to use it. As far as the front, both of them have a 12 megapixel shooter selfie. And on the S23 Ultra, I would say that it does again add a little bit more vibrancy to the photo. So I kind of think it looks a little bit better just because on the skin color, it makes my skin color look a little bit more tanner, which I kind of like. Versus on the iPhone, it does make me look just a little bit more pale because it mutes the colors a little bit. But besides that, both of them are not necessarily accurate to my skin color, but I'd say both look good in detail though, and both of them also have autofocus on the front, so meaning that you can point some or put something in front of your face and it'll be able to focus on it. So it really will depend on what you prefer for your selfies, but I think both of them have a good argument between each other. As far as back video, you can go up to 8K on the S23 Ultra, but I personally only shoot 4K on both of my devices. And both I think are pretty solid overall. Again, the S23 Ultra does make the colors a little bit more punchier, a little bit more vibrant, more vivid and saturated. So if you like those super poppy colors, the S23 Ultra is definitely going to stand out more to you. Versus the iPhone, again, it mutes the colors a little bit, so it just means it's more natural looking compared to the two. Both of them I think have good focus and stabilization overall, and pretty good detail on both of the videos. But as you start to zoom in, you can see that the S23 Ultra does have the ability to zoom in further. So it does cap out at a max of 20x versus 9x on the iPhone. And the quality, I would say, is pretty impressive on the S23 Ultra for 20x. As far as video on the front, both of them can shoot 4K 30. Both, again, look pretty good. And again, very similar to the back cameras on the photos of the front, where the color is a little bit more vivid and more saturated looking on the S23 Ultra. So it's kind of up to you to decide which one you prefer. But besides that, both again look sharp and good and stabilized. And depending on the lighting situation, you may prefer one over the other over the other because of that different color tuning. I also tried out the stabilization modes, so both of them can shoot up to 1440p quality for these stabilization modes, so it just makes the video very well stabilized if you're moving a lot. What I did notice is that on the ultra wide, both of them looked really good. I think both of them did a really good job at stabilizing the video when you're running. But if you switch to the wide lens, I noticed that the S23 Ultra does have a little bit more jittering. Kind of looks like it's trying too hard in the post-processing or in the processing to make the video stabilize. Versus the iPhone, it did sway a little bit, but it didn't look as AI over-processed in my opinion. As far as the cinematic modes with that fake blur, I only really tried it on a fence, not a real subject, but still, I would say that the iPhone did a better job of focusing on that fence and applying that blur. It's up to you to decide if you liked it or not, but one thing cool with the S23 Ultra is that you do have different options besides just a background blur. You have the decolor, which makes the subject a color and then the rest like a gray and white, or you have that glitch mode, and both of them also have the cinematic mode on both the front and on the back. And like I said, both of them work very similarly, and whatever features you can do on the S23 Ultra on the back are also on the front with the different blur, decolor, and glitch options. Now, as far as low light and nighttime modes on the back, the photos, both of them are actually pretty impressive that you can take a pretty much or pretty near pitch black situation into a pretty usable or decently usable photo. But the S23 Ultra just brings in a little bit more light. The iPhone has this effect where the center of the image is decently lit up, but then on the outside there's like a little circle that just a little bit darker and black. But the S23 Ultra again brings in a little bit more light and it's a little bit more detail. So for me, I think the S23 Ultra just rocked it with low light situations, and it also retained those color tunings, so it does add a little bit more color and pop to the photo, versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max that did, again, tend to mute the colors a little bit. Same with the low light photos on the front. Both of them do light up the screen a little bit to give you a little bit of light, but again, the S23 Ultra just crushes the iPhone. The iPhone just looks way too washed out, very noisy. The S23 Ultra can get like that as well, but it does a little bit better of a better job getting more detail out of like complete darkness. Now, as far as video though, low light video, both of them, again, impressive that they can do a little bit of something out of pitch blackness, but the iPhone takes the win here. Not only does all three lenses bring in a little bit more light, but there's just a lot less noise, it's more clarity and more detail. It's kind of like the photos of the S23 Ultra, but put into the video for the iPhone. So the iPhone takes the win for low light and video compared to the S23 Ultra. And also the tuning of the color, you can see that the iPhone tends to lean more towards like a greener tint versus the S23 Ultra that's more like on the bluer tint. But overall though, as far as cameras, it's hard to choose which one you prefer. Just know that both of them are going to be providing you with fantastic cameras. If you're a professional, I don't know which one you're going to pick. Just leave me in the comments below which one you would pick as far as cameras. Me, I think both of them are pretty good. Now, as far as the battery life, the iPhone does have a 4,323 milliamp hour battery versus the S23 Ultra that has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Both of them, I would say, are very good overall. But my experience, I'm still able to get a little bit more battery out of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So in total, I would say I get anywhere from like 22 to about sometimes even 30 hours of total usage with the iPhone, with maybe 5 to 7 or so hours of screen on time. Versus the S23 Ultra will get me anywhere from maybe 16 to about 24-ish, 22-ish hours of total usage. So both of them are definitely all-day battery life, but I'm still able to get a couple more hours with the iPhone. And I forgot to mention screen on time for the S23 Ultra, but it's typically around the same, around 4 to about 7 hours of screen on time. And my usage is like, basic scrolling around social media, usually a lot of Reddit, YouTube, and stuff like that. And both of them have an Apple Watch or a Samsung Watch connected to them at all times, with Bluetooth turned on, with Wi-Fi turned on. Usually only Wi-Fi, and sometimes 5G. But yeah, with my usage, both of them are good, but still a little bit more hours out of the iPhone. And as far as charging though, the S23 Ultra definitely has better charge time. So for one, it can use a 45 watt charger, but you do have to get a 45 watt brick and then also a 5 amp cable. So with that altogether, you do get around an hour and like 5 or so minutes of total charge time, just a little over an hour then, versus on the iPhone, it takes, I think, only 23 watts of fast charging or 25 watts, but it takes well around an hour and like 30 to 45 minutes or so. So it is a bit slower, but if you're charging from 0 to like, I don't know, 50%, it takes maybe a half hour or so. So I should say actually after a half hour, both of them are at around like 50 to 60, I think 70% on the S23 Ultra. So that should be enough juice to get you through the rest of the day if you have to charge in the afternoon or something like that. And then both of them also have wireless charging, but the S23 Ultra does have reverse wireless charging as well. And then the iPhone has that MagSafe capability built in, so you can use a magnet charger or something like that. So at the end of the day, which one should you go out and get? It's definitely a tough decision for those who don't really care about Android versus iOS, that they just want a great phone and will adapt to whatever ecosystem they get into, because both of them have great hardware, great performance, great battery life, great cameras, and great software. Now for me, I would say the iOS is good software just because it's missing some stuff that I prefer, which is how the S23 Ultra for me would be the winner. Just because I prefer the different features and multitasking and customization abilities that you have with One UI. But if you prefer the simplicity of iOS, then you might want to go with iOS. So it's really going to come down to your personal preference because both of them are fantastic devices. But my winner for me, like I said, is the S23 Ultra. But everyone has their own preference. Hopefully this video helped you decide which one you think would be better for you. With that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.